one, two, three. Baby check, baby 1, 2. Chick, baby check, baby 1. It's Teddy, ready with the 1, 2 checker. Rests in the fence, but I'm.
And good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us here tonight on King Jordan Radio for Thursday, March 10, 2016. Tonight on the show, we will get into the knife that was found on the O.J. Simpson estate back in '98. Does it mean anything? Can we prosecute the juice, or is it double jeopardy? We'll find that out tonight. Tonight also, we'll get into the Hulk Hogan sex trial. Did Gawker cross the line when taping Hulk Hogan and putting it out there for everybody to see? Plus, a Connecticut teenager who was slashed to death could possibly only get 13 years. You heard it right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, to join us to talk about these issues and more is CNN legal analyst, and he's a New York City defense attorney. He's seen every day on HLN or CNN. Ladies and gentlemen, with great pleasure, I bring back to you the one and only Mr. Joey Jackson. Good evening, Joey. Welcome back to the King Jordan Radio Show. How are you?
You know, I'm fabulous. It's nice to be with you. I was so listening to the music when I called. I didn't want you to answer. It was so entertaining. I said, "This is great. Let me listen." You know.
It is by TBT, so we like to play the old school music. Obviously, this is part of the '90s, and it was interesting. They play. I don't know if you've been watching the series. Maybe you could tell us the People versus OJ on the FX network, and they have been playing songs I've been growing up with Coolio and all kinds of great songs. It's all these great songs, and it's really like reliving being back in the '90s. Give me your thoughts on that.
It's amazing. It's amazing. The series is absolutely incredible, and the songs,
riveting.
Everything. I mean, I think it's so well done. I'm just going to miss it so much. I can't believe there's only about 4 episodes left, I make sure that I'm home, and I can't wait to see it when I can.
Well, it's 12 weeks, I think, right? Isn't it? It's a 12-week show.
I'm hoping it's 15. I'm hoping they do a few more episodes,
It's great. It's great. They got everybody down pat,
It's unbelievable.
From the judge.
Johnny. Oh, my God. How smooth is Johnny Cochran? How smooth is he? He's incredible,
I can't tell the difference. They both have the same slickness, in the courtroom. It's amazing.
It's incredible.
They do a great portrayal, I tell you.
Marsha Clark and the whole bit. It's an unbelievable thing. So I hope it doesn't end.
And you and a lot of other people are interested because this ratings is higher than the NBA ratings. It's one of the highest ratings on TV on Tuesday nights. What do you attribute that to? Yes.
I attribute it to people being fascinated by it, and I just think it's riveting. It's incredible. And I just think it's an unbelievably well-done series. So God bless them, the creators who put it together. I think that they do Marsha Clark, you would think it was Marsha Clark who was there. It's the whole thing. Christopher Darden, all the characters. And how good is John Travolta with what he does?
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
His career was just about dead with all the allegations and things like that, and he just came back with a bang. I think you would agree, playing Bob Shapiro.
Listen, I never would count John Travolta out. I would never count him out. How many times has he been, said to be done and gone, and he comes back with some type of riveting performance? After Pulp Fiction, it was all uphill for him. So God bless him. God bless him. Another John.
And then they got
John
Judge Ito down. They got
Ito, everybody. Mark Furman.
The witnesses.
It's just absolutely
What about
incredible.
OJ? Some people had question marks on OJ. What's your thoughts on the guy playing OJ? Cuba,
Cuba's he's a great actor. I would never take anything away from him at all. Right. I don't know that he makes the best OJ, but he does a fabulous job at what he does. And I know he's worked very hard, so I certainly wouldn't want to disparage him at all. But, it's I can see why people have their question marks about him. But notwithstanding that, I just think overall they just do such a dynamite job. I'm so riveted. Last episode, what did they say? Simi Valley. Simi Valley. I mean, you remember the part with the witness? They're going back and forth. And it was interesting because it was like Johnny Cochran set him up because they were talking, prior to going in and testifying, and he was asking the detective where he lived. And that was the detective, of course, who had taken evidence home with him for an evening. And he's, the point
and right
was...
before that, he was having a cup of coffee with him.
Yeah,
remember that?
Exactly. Oh, God.
So he's
It's so well
done. Is that how
done.
it usually goes from a lawyer's perspective? Prosecution, and the judge
really
likes
does.
that. The judge really likes to see the prosecution and the defense get along, right?
The point is that oftentimes it's very contentious in a courtroom. You can't help but having kind of, tensions run very high. Everyone's trying to win. You're trying to protect your client. But at the same time, I think that oftentimes, it depends on the case and it depends upon the prosecutor, but oftentimes, if you've dealt with them in the past, there's a healthy respect and there's a good relationship. And so sometimes people mistake when you might say hello to the prosecutor or have a cordial relationship that, you're selling out and you're not committed to the case. No, it's that people are people. And inside a courtroom, we do battle, and outside the courtroom, we're congenial and we're, respectful to each other. It's not unlike athletes. If you've ever seen a boxing match, and I know you're into your wrestling, but, you look and you see boxers and they feed each other to a pulp.
Too.
And then they hug each other after it's done. We just spent 12 rounds beating each other to a pulp, and then
they're
hug
killing each other, and then it's out for a beer.
Yeah. It's like that in a courtroom. You have a healthy respect for you going
there
at
are
it.
but there are exceptions, I'm sure.
Exceptions to every rule. You better believe that. I learned that the first day of law school. It was interesting, and I know we'll get to the issues at hand, but I always joke when I used to teach for the longest of times, and I miss it so much, I just don't have the ability to do it, because I'm focused on other things right now. But one of the things I always used to tell my class when I was teaching a civil rights course was I said, okay, we're going to talk about hearsay, and hearsay is a rule where there are out-of-court statements that are not admitted because their reliability is in question, and so hearsay is not admissible. So in law school, we spent literally, 2 weeks talking about how hearsay is not admissible, and then I think we spent the rest of the year talking about the exceptions to the hearsay rule on when you could admit evidence, and that's not unlike the law. I mean, there are so many rules, and then in the law, there's so many things that provide exceptions to allow you to admit things into evidence. So, anyway, it's a fun thing. Law is a very fun thing. There's a lot of gray area. And there's a lot of ways that you can argue.
Harvey Levin had reported that Johnny had a way of getting on Darden's skin. He was reporting that for CBS Los Angeles. I saw a clip of Harvey from TMZ yesterday talking about that. Do you know if that's true, A? And if it is true, do you believe that?
Well, listen, I think I'm going to tell you what I believe to be true. What I believe to be true is that Johnny Cochran was just such a tacticianer. He's just so, and I think that based upon his strategy, I just think that he commanded and controlled the courtroom, and if he wanted a story to be told, it was told. If he wanted to upset a witness, he did. If he wanted to get under somebody's skin, he could, because he was a master tactician. And so, the fact of the matter is that I believe that Johnny Cochran would be able to do whatever he wanted. If he wanted to upset you, he would. If he wanted you to love him, he would. And you saw that on display with Van Etter, the witness, when they were joking and laughing, and then he gets into the courtroom and he kills him.
Who keeps that overnight?
You took evidence home with you? Are you kidding me? So that's kind of Johnny Cochran. So, God bless him. And there's just so many things about that story that you can relate to just, the way that trials operate. His whole thing about, look, we're not going to respond to what the prosecution's witnesses say. We're going to tell our own story, and we're going to make our story, so incredibly believable and so incredibly compelling that the jury's not going to have any choice but to buy it, and that's exactly what happened. So I give him credit.
And
I
it's
give
almost
that team
like
credit.
what Johnny did was he objected to almost everything, and Marcia had a he was like the prosecutor for the LAPD, and Marcia Clark played the defense attorney for the, defending the LAPD.
It's
That's
a great
what it turned
point.
into.
It's a great point. And, in these trials, I think one of the most important things, and, this is something I talk about a lot with, other attorneys, and that is that it's all about the narrative. You frame the issue. And I think the important thing is how you're going to frame the issue. If the issue is about did O.J. do it, and look at his past history, and let's examine who he was and how he allegedly abused Nicole and how he had the motive and the opportunity, if you phrase the issue in that way and you debate that issue, he loses. If the issue becomes whether they rushed to judgment and whether evidence was contaminated and whether they preserved the crime scene and whether they took shortcuts and whether they could be trusted and whether they lied and whether they could be believed, if you frame the issue that way, as Johnny Cochran did, then, of course, the defense carries the day. And I think they were brilliant at doing that, and I think it works in so many trials. And there's an old saying, Jordan, and the old saying is, look, if the law is on your side, you argue the law. If the facts are on your side, you argue the facts. If neither the law or the facts are on your side, you pound on the table. And that's basically, what happens in court throughout America on any given day. So, but fascinating. Fascinating stuff.
This new evidence that has been found, ironically, during this amazing show that we're talking about, is that knife. And they said it's going to take about 3 weeks till if they could decide if there's any connection. Now, you had your thoughts about it on HLN. Why don't you share with my audience, first of all, explain to the audience what you think is going to happen with this knife.
Sure, I would love to. Well, first thing is I share your skepticism. And in talking about this issue, I would be remiss in saying how coincidental that some knife is found on O.J. Simpson's former estate, which has been bulldozed or what have you. And it just happens to be that it coincides, the story coincides with the FX hit movie that's out. I find that a little coincidental, but be that as it may, let us address the issue of the knife. In addressing the issue of the knife, though, I think it's important to point out that the alleged story is as follows. The story is that apparently a construction worker who was working at that site, we should know, and the audience should know, that they bulldozed O.J. Simpson's home and it was purchased and a new home was put up by a new owner. In any event, a construction worker, as the tale goes, I'll call it a tale, saw an off-duty police officer and decided to give him the knife, saying to him, that officer, that, hey, look, I found this knife on O.J.'s property. I'm not going to go to the precinct myself. You're an officer. Can you turn it in? The officer then apparently called, again, allegedly. He called it in and said, hey, I have this knife. What do you want me to do? The command says the case is closed. As a result of that, don't do anything. These are all, again, with the officer, from the officer's perspective, who took the knife. He then goes home with the knife, and he keeps the knife for 12 years thereafter. And he then calls. And in calling, he calls now 12 years later, which is essentially present day, and he says, hey, what's the case number of the O.J. case? I have this knife that was given to me. I want to engrave it and hang it on my wall. The person he talked to was incredulous. They said, are you serious? He tells his superior officers. The superior officers call an officer, the cop who called in the knife and said, get it in here now. It's not your property. We need to test it. We need to analyze it. We need to do A, B, and C to it. So that's how the story goes. And we should say that the knife apparently that was found 5 years after the murder itself occurred. So we're talking about a knife that's so far removed from the actual incident as to have limited value. Now, be that as it may, the question then becomes, okay, well, what can now happen? Issue number one, can O.J. Simpson be prosecuted if they test the knife and they see and they find his DNA and Nicole Brown's DNA and Ronald Goldman's DNA? And the answer to that question, of course, we know to be no. And we know it to be no. Why? Because of the double jeopardy statute, which says that you cannot be prosecuted for the same offense twice. So then, of course, now we get to the issue, well, what if then somebody else is